Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm Lohan, and in this video I'm going to talk about some of the books that I've read in the month of September. I say some because there are three that I'm going to treat in separate videos. One is Tomb of Sand, which I loved, and I'm going to talk about in a video about my reading around the world and Invisible Cities. So I read this one for India, and luckily I have lots of books that I ordered for Invisible Cities that hopefully are going to come in sometime soon, and then I'm going to read them, and etc, etc. Many books that I'm very much looking forward to. And the other two books that I'm not going to talk about now are these two Penguin Green Idea books. We've got A Warning from the Golden Toad by Tim Flannery and Hot and Money by Naomi Klein. I'm doing a separate reading vlog where I read the 4 Penguin Green Idea books that I own. These were interesting, especially this one. Luckily, there are books that I am going to talk about on. The first one is the one that I'm very, very proud to have finished. Saying that I have read this book feels like a victory. Saying that I have read this book in 2 months is also some kind of victory. I am happy that I've read it and happy that it is over. I am talking about War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Finished this! I was reading this for my book club. I'd already read the first half in August and still had to read the second in September. Really appreciated how big this was, and at the same time it was too big. So War and Peace, I'm not going to talk about the plot very much right now because there are probably a lot of videos out there, and this is not a book that is really about its plot. It is about war. Specifically the war with Napoleon and Russia, and we see some battles being fought first more near France, and then how Napoleon decides to invade Russia, go to Moscow, realize that's not a good idea, and go back. You see a lot of that. Not my favorite parts, but I ended up enjoying them. And then we've got a lot of love parts where it's more about social standings and drama and love. We've got a cute little love triangle kind of going on, but a lot more about women and men trying to find their position in society and all that goes with that. Now, because this is a break, Leo Tolstoy takes the opportunity to explore characters. He takes the time to make these complex beings that will think A, do B, 5 months later think B, do A. To some people, I heard that some of the characters felt like they weren't making logical choices, but for me that was logical because none of us always do logical things. We will switch sometimes, we will do things that could be uncharacteristic. So I loved how real these characters were. They felt like they were 3D. You see them evolving over time, sometimes in a way that you do like, sometimes in a way that you don't like. Yeah, really appreciated. The drama, maybe not so much. I wasn't interested in the lovey-dovey side that much, and when the characters are young, we've got this scene at the beginning where we've got these 4 young people that promise their hearts to one another, and you just know, like, you're 16, this is never gonna happen, just stop it. But it also makes sense. You see 16-year-olds making decisions, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and also some older men, although a little bit less. Now, it is focused on this Russian upper class. There is very little about the normal people, the people that were actually working the fields, and I think that makes sense because Leo Tolstoy, I think he thought a lot about the messages that he put in the book. There's so many of them, but when it comes to war, for example, he's not going to be able to talk about what war is for the lower class because he simply is not that. And I think that is why he focuses so much on the upper class and people that were just in charge of diplomatics and stuff. Now, in the second book, there are a couple of sections when he talks about the war that Leo Tolstoy starts to talk about to us about some of his philosophical ideas about why war is or is not a good thing, and about free will, and about so much stuff. And there were times where that was interesting and I was like, oh wow, that makes sense. So for example, he has this whole idea that you can't really analyze history when you're still into it. You need to, the further you are away, the more you are going to see that it's not individuals that drive events, it is really how the whole of society moves one way or another. So right now we can't, well, in his time, for example, he couldn't see Napoleon as being a symbol of the time. He saw Napoleon as, people then saw Napoleon as being the person that drove France to Moscow and stuff like that. But if you look at it centuries and centuries later, so for his time, if he looked at what happened during the les Templiers, the Crusades, then we don't see people influencing things. We see how it's very logical that that whole movement happened within the context of the world and how ideas were changing. So I like that it's not, it's never really an individual driving thing. That individual is just a symbol of the time, and if it's not that individual that does it, then it's probably going to be another individual that has the same ideas, because that is just what people are looking for at that time. On the one hand, makes me sad, because if no individual has influence, then what the heck are we doing? On the other one, this is positive, I think. These ideas are the driving forces, not stupid people. I don't know. Positives and negatives. Anyway, philosophical parts, sometimes love them, sometimes not so much. At the end, there are two epilogues. One is that ties up the social lovey-dovey, like the stories of some of the characters, and then there's a second epilogue that is just an essay about, I don't know what it's about because I was not interested. Throughout the book there were parts that I realized I wasn't really listening, and then I went back to either listen or read, because why read a brick if you're not really reading it? What's the point if you're just turning pages? So I was taking my time, but with the epilogue, could not care less. So I listened to it. I didn't hear, no, I heard all of it. I didn't listen to any part of it. But I have to admit, I am sure I'm going to read this book again. Not anytime soon, but maybe in like 5 years, 10 years, because it has so many things, you can't see it all. You shouldn't even want to see it all. There's things you're going to see at one point in your life, and there's things that you're going to interpret differently in another point in your life. So, and see, this is why also why this is a classic. It is one that you can read multiple times and you're always going to take something else from it, either from the layers that Tolstoy put in there, or depending on your own status in life. So this, happy to have read it, very, very proud. I can now say I read War and Peace, and I liked it. Also looking forward to reading some smaller books right now, which is what I then started doing. Would recommend War and Peace, by the way, if you think you can appreciate it. I think that if you're just reading it to read it, then don't bother. If you open it and you're like, what the heck am I doing? Then, well, what I did, I mean, that happened to me at the beginning. There are these war parts that like, I could not be bothered. Interesting to see the chaos in the armies. Definitely believe that's a true thing. But I read a couple of articles as to why I should read War and Peace, and it was really those articles telling me, you're going to love the complexities of the characters and blah blah blah. That I thought, okay, maybe then I'll try to focus on that, and that's how I kind of went through it. There are some parts that you're gonna not like as much as others, because it's a complex thing. Anyway, the other books that I've read, like I said, was craving some smaller things. So I read Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. To be honest, I can't remember whether I read this when I was done with War and Peace or while I was still reading it as a little palate cleanser for the weekend. This was translated from the Japanese by Jini Takemori. This is a short book about a woman that is a convenience store worker, and this woman has some struggles when it comes to living in the world that we have created. When it comes to social norms, she would not be, yeah, she has some social struggles, and working at the convenience store, because there are some very clear rules as to how you should behave, makes life so clear for her. She finds her place, and that makes her happy. So it talks about that, and it talks about how it's difficult then to still see, for example, old high school friends, because she's 35 or something when this book is happening, and she has to explain why she's fine working part-time at a convenience store, and how she saw the convenience store evolve over time and stuff like that. I love the discussion in this about how the world that we've created is not going to work for everyone, and that how for some people it's hard to find their place, and even when they find their place, to stay in that place. And this is about her not being able to leave what she needs and just accepting what she needs. So really appreciated this. Thank you, Paula, for gifting it to me. Another book that I read as a palate cleanser was Death and Croissants by Ian Moore. This was so much fun. This is a mystery. It's set in France. We got this middle-aged Englishman who has we've got an old Englishman who owns a bed and breakfast. Yes, I managed to say it. And his life is not going very well. It's all very boring. Him and his wife are not on good terms. They're probably going to separate. And one morning, a bloody handprint is found somewhere on the wall in his B&B, and it turns out also that one of his guests has disappeared. Now, he's not very bothered, but another guest at the hotel, a woman, decides, yes, we are going to tackle this mystery because I need some excitement in my life and you are going to help me. And initially, what's his name? Richard? Yes, Richard. Richard is not interested at all. He does not want to be bothered. He does not like that his life is as boring as could be. He does not want to change that. He doesn't dare to change that. But then his favorite hen is murdered. She's called Anna Gardner because he likes to watch all these movies. That's what he's known for. And that's when he decides, okay, I'm going to go into this. And they try to solve this mystery. There are a lot of other parties involved. It is so much fun. There are so many, fun. It's ridiculous from the start to the end. The handprint is stolen within 5 minutes of having been found. Yes, you can steal a handprint. There's so much ridiculous things. There's this dog that's been transported everywhere that he hates. It was so entertaining. I was smiling the whole way through, and still, I am not going to keep this book. And there's a second part, apparently. I'm not going to read that. I am not even going to look into other books that are like this, I think. Although this was so entertaining. It doesn't make sense in my head why I find this thing that made me happy, but I'm still not going to pursue it. Maybe I just have to wrap my head around it, but maybe because it's the level of ridicule, in the same way that sometimes you're gonna watch these action movies and it just, like Mission Impossible, where gravity just doesn't exist, but it's still entertaining. And then you go back to your documentary. I'm a documentary kind of person. That sometimes, I don't need, maybe yes, maybe okay, I need to, like cozy mysteries, that maybe is something that I should read once in a while and just pick them up from the library, because they're nice. They're nice. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. The other book that I read, last one, is what I read on audio, and that's Pale View from the Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. I want to read one Kazuo Ishiguro each year, and so I decided to pick this one up. This one is his first ever written novel, so it's a little bit weird. You kind of see already his writing style. It's very light and clear, but at the same time it doesn't have the maturity level. That's not a nice word. It doesn't have the level that you also see in his other novels, where he focuses a little bit more. I think what you see with a lot of debut authors is that they want so much that they tackle too many things instead of focusing on one thing and then executing that very well. So A Pale View from the Hills, it's multiple timelines. One is a Japanese woman that lives in the UK, and it's shortly after one of her two daughters has committed suicide and the other daughter comes to visit her. And they kind of talk/not talk about the suicide. You see that she's not dealing very well with it. She's ignoring it, basically, and she's kind of also lost touch with the daughter that is coming to visit. So you see that happening a little bit. They talk about why it is that they're estranged, or well, they don't talk about that. You just see the estrangement being there. And the other timeline, because when her daughter is there, she reflects about the time that she was still living in Japan. She was a young wife, she was pregnant of her first child, and she met another woman that was very wealthy and was not taking care of her child very well. And they have a couple of scenes, we're gonna call them, where they talk, where you see that interaction, and there's some weird parallels that you end up finding out between her life when she's in London and the life of that woman at that time. It talks mostly about woman-daughter relationship, mother-daughter relationship, and it also touches upon other subjects, such as the position of Japan in the contemporary time, because when she's in Japan, it's the period just shortly after the Second World War, so it talks a little bit about Nagasaki and what happened there. It's very, very nuanced. It doesn't talk about it, you just see it being there, but it's not a subject, if that kind of makes sense. It talks a little bit about how Japanese were raised with a lot of respect for their elders and how that is changing. It touches upon many things without actually touching them, and that's maybe why the book didn't work very well for me, because I would have liked a little bit to be either actually touching those things or not touching them. It felt like they were like separate little islands, and it was hard to see why she would talk about one thing when I thought the book was going to go in the other direction. You don't get any type of answers. There's very little narrative. Maybe that's the thing, that there's very little narrative to the book. Still interesting. I still kind of enjoyed it. It was I see it as a good stepping stone for Kazuo Ishiguro's other work, kind of. Still very interested in reading the rest of what he's written. But yeah, this was a debut novel those were all of the books that I have read in September, I believe. It's weird because I've got these two chunksters and then I've got these shorter books. Right now I'm reading, I think, 4 different books at the same time, which is not a good idea because I was looking forward to not doing that. Anyway, I am going to stop talking. If you've read any of these books, as always, would love to hear from you, especially War and Peace. Have you read it? Did you like it? Do you feel like you've cracked some kind of, you're part of the elite readers because you've read War and Peace, or it's just in my head that I feel like I've leveled up somehow because I've done this achievement? No, it's not a level up, it's an achievement. It's like, I've got this badge, read War and Peace and liked it. Going to try to find a movie to watch, although I'm afraid all the movies are going to concentrate on the drama side of it. And I would love to appreciate the philosophical discussions a little bit more. Anyway, I said I was gonna stop talking, didn't I? Gonna stop talking. See you in another video. Bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.